NPS equals 1. Alright. Now, let's do our calculation. So in our open economy with imports, what is my formula? My formula is 1 divided by NPS plus NPM. So I'm just going to go back to this slide over here. Remember, in my 4-sector model, this is my formula. 1 divided by NPS plus MRT over NPM. Now, we don't have taxes in this example. So my formula is 1 over NPS, which I worked out, plus NPM. So that's where I'm getting the formula from. Alright, so let's go back. Right, so this is where I am over here. So 1 divided by 0.1, that's NPS, plus 0.10, which is, sorry, that should be 0.1, guys. Sorry, that should be 0.1 as well. So just make a correction there. It's 1 over 0.1 plus 0.1. And that gives me 1 over 0.2, which gives me 5. So what does that tell me? I have now calculated, grade 12s, the value of the multiplier in the 4-sector model. Okay, value of the multiplier in the 4-sector model is 5. Okay, I'm just going to pause and I'm going to say that again. I have used the formula for the 4-sector model based on the information I was given and that I worked out to calculate the value of the multiplier, which is 5 in the 4-sector model. So any injection will be increased by 5 times. Because remember, that's what the multiplier does. It says for any injection, how many times will that increase as the money moves around the economy? So go back to your definition of the multiplier. For any initial injection, there is a greater final change in output and expenditure. Okay, so I hope that's clear to everybody. If we didn't have imports, everybody, what would the multiplier be? So that's straightforward. Okay, my formula for the closed economy with no imports, my formula is 1 over 1 minus NPC, 1 over 1 minus 0.9, 1 over 0.10, which gives you 10. So the value of the multiplier without the imports is 10. So for any injection, there will be a 10 times increase in economic activity as a result of that injection. But when I've got my import, economic activity only increases by 5 times. Because remember, what did I say right at the beginning? Imports are a leakage and will decrease the impact of any change in spending on aggregate income. Right, take a deep breath, grade 12s. This is quite a complex question, isn't it? But the point of the question is to introduce you to the idea of the 4-sector model, to make sure you know the formula for the 4-sector model, and that you can use the formula to answer a question. So to sum up our answer, grade 12s, the effect of imports is to reduce the change in income as a result of a change in spending. From a multiple of 10, here we go, that was your closed economy with no imports, to a multiple of 5, so the multiplier is 5. That's my open economy with imports. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap quickly to the visualizer, everybody, and I'm going to show you that there is another way that you could have worked this out. So let me swap to the visualizer, and you can take this down as well, because I want to give you the different options so that the second way that I'm going to show you might be more familiar or might be easier for some of you. Okay. So the information that we were given was that MPC equals 0.9 and MPM equals 0.1. In other words, 90%, well, I'm going off the page, and let's write it here, 10%. That's the information that you were given. So you could have written the formula like this, grade 12s. You could have said 1 over 1 minus MPC minus MEM. You could have used that formula. Because remember, MPC is an injection and imports are a leakage. So let's follow this through. It would have been 1 minus 90 minus 10. 1 over 1 minus 1 over 1 minus 80. Okay, let's just move my page up a little bit. And that equals 1 over 1 over 20 equals 5. So you come up with the same answer. But here what they've done is they've just said the MPC was 90, that's an injection. The MPM is 10, that's a leakage. So it's 1 over 1 minus MPC minus MPM, 1 over 1 minus 90 minus 10, 1 over 1 minus 80, which gives me 1 over 20, which gives me 5. So the answer works out being the same. But in the textbooks that they're using, you won't find this formula. You will find the formula for the 4-sector model, which is 1 over MPS plus MRT plus MPM. So that's why in the answer I gave you, I wanted to use this formula because I think this is the one that you will be familiar with. But this is another way to do it. Alright, so that's quite a challenging question. Really just the 0.5 part, everybody. So if you get a question like this and you think, oh, this looks difficult, remember only 4 marks might have been challenging. The rest was probably quite straightforward. So again, don't panic. Very important. Alright, are there any questions from your side, grade 12? Does any teacher want to type something in the type box? Or can we go on to the next one? Okay, let's go on, everybody. Sorry, I just want to get back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so let's go on to the next question, which is question 5 that you guys have there in front of you. So this is all about unemployment and supply side measures to solving unemployment and our good old Phillips curve. So very important for you guys to read the extract before you answer the questions, because often, as I said right in the beginning this morning, a lot of the answers can be found in the extract or are directly related to the extract. Alright, so let's go. So this is all about youth graduate unemployment rate increases in Q1 of 2019. Remember, Q1 in economics grade 12 stands for quarter 1, which is the first 3 months of the year. In economics, the year is divided up into quarters, which means sections of 3 months each. So, I'm going to give you a minute to quickly read through the extract, and then we will go through the questions together. Right, go! All right, everybody, let's carry on. So, question 1. Which policy can be implemented to reduce unemployment in South Africa? So, we can use both demand and supply side policies. So, as I said to you, grade 12s, this section or this question is all about the topic of the new economic paradigm, which you did under business cycles. And remember, the new economic paradigm is a combination of demand and supply side policies. So, how can demand side policies reduce unemployment? So, as we've already mentioned, the government can use fiscal policy, which is government spending. For example, the EPWP. So, what does that stand for? I'm sure you know that is the Expanded Public Works Program. Public works is building of infrastructure. So the government can spend money on building infrastructure, which will create demand for goods and services needed to build infrastructure. This will create jobs, and when people have jobs, they earn an income, and what do? They spend that income, and therefore demand increases. And we can even say the multiplier effect will come into play. So that's the first thing you could have said. And then you could have spoken about supply side policies. Remember, supply side policies, grade 12s, are all about increasing production, making it easier for producers to expand the output that they can produce. So one way to do that, that's related to unemployment, is increased education and training. For example, increasing education subsidies, which will improve the chances of people who are educated or trained finding a job, and that will reduce unemployment, which is what the question was all about. So you can talk about demand side policies, or you can talk about supply side policies. Remember, grade 12s, this is only for 1 mark. So this information that I've put in here is for your understanding. But if you had just written demand side policies or supply side policies, you would have got your 1 mark. But I just want to make sure that you understand what we are talking about. So remember, for a 1 mark question, it's 1 word, 1 phrase, perhaps a sentence, but generally 1 or 2 word answers. Right, now this is a tricky question, the next one. What is the current unemployment rate? You won't find it in the extract. They don't talk about that. They just talk about the unemployment rate in certain age groups. But the extract does not talk about the overall unemployment rate. So the current unemployment rate for the first quarter of this year, grade 12s, was 32.6%. So please make a note of that. I suggest you also make a note of statistics such as what is the repo rate at the moment, what is the current rate of inflation. And a really good website to go to is the South African Reserve Bank website. If you go onto the website, you'll see right at the top of that website, they've got a whole banner and it gives you the types of statistics. It gives you CPI, it gives you the repo rate, it gives you the prime lending rate. While you're doing your studying, something like current rate of unemployment is a very good one to know. Right. New economic paradigm, everybody. So that is our point 3 definition question. So remember the new economic paradigm, I'm going to go to the bottom here, everybody, uses demand side policies and supply side policies to smooth business cycles, to ensure long-term economic growth and stability. So remember what the new economic paradigm says, grade 12s, is it's all very well using demand side policies. We stimulate economic growth, but what does that lead to? That leads to inflation. Why? Because supply is slow at catching up to increases in demand. And when demand is greater than supply, we have shortages. And that leads to producers putting their prices up, which leads to inflation. So what is the solution, grade 12? The solution is our supply side policies. So we put policies in place that can help businesses and governments to increase supply of goods and services so that we can have the increased demand from demand side policies without the inflation. Something else you could have written for your definition of the new economic paradigm: discourages policymakers from using monetary and fiscal policies. So that would be demand side policies, everybody. Monetary and fiscal policies are your demand side policies. Focuses on achieving economic stability relating to demand and supply. Okay, so make sure you've got that down. That the key to the new economic paradigm is that we want to use demand and supply side policies to create long-term economic growth and stability. If we only use demand side policies, which is monetary and fiscal policy, we will stimulate demand, but that will lead to inflation, and that is not sustainable in the long run. Eventually, we will have loss of jobs as a result of that. Alright, everybody, I hope you guys are all good and all with me, and we can go on to the last part of this question, which is about the Phillips curve. So the question says, two more questions, Explain the individual cost of unemployment to society as a whole. So grade 12, what are they talking about here? They're talking about externalities, right? The individual cost of employment, so if I lose my job, what is the cost to society as a whole? Alright? What is the cost to society as a whole? So there are two parts to this question. So if I lose my job, I lose my income, and that can lead to poverty, and there can be negative psychological effects. I could become depressed or anxious. So that's the first part of the question. Okay, the individual cost. Poverty, psychological effects such as depression or anxiety. But you must remember to answer the second part of the question. What is the cost to society as a whole? In other words, what are the externalities? That's what they're asking you, grade 12s. What are the externalities of unemployment? And it would be the financial cost to the state of welfare programs, like our social security grants and our unemployment grants. And the TERS grant, grade 12s, TERS, Temporary Employment Relief Scheme, that the government has had to give people because of COVID, is a great example of this. That cost to society as a whole of people becoming unemployed due to COVID is increased government expenditure on social security grants like the TERS grant. TERS. Alright, so I hope that question is clear to everybody. Alright, and then the last question, remember it's for 4 marks, and it's always the most challenging of the questions. They want you to talk about the Phillips curve. And it says, discuss the policy implications of the existence of the Phillips curve. So I've got the answer here, but let's first go and have a look at the Phillips curve. Let's just remind ourselves what the Phillips curve is, everybody. So here it is. On our y-axis, we have inflation, and on our x-axis, we have unemployment. Those are the two things that we are measuring, unemployment and inflation. I start at PC. Okay, that's my first Phillips curve. And I start at a rate of unemployment at 14%. And can you guys all see that there's 0 inflation? Right. The government says, well, this is not good enough. We need to reduce unemployment. Let us use some demand-side policies. For example, let's increase government expenditure on expanded public works programs, for example. Or let's build a new school. So demand-side policies are put in place. We move to point B on the graph. So we are very happy because unemployment has dropped to 10%. But can you see on the y-axis, grade 12s, what has happened? Inflation has increased to 2%. Can you see that? So inflation, let me use my pointer. Unemployment has dropped as a result of demand-side policies, which is positive. But what has happened to inflation? Inflation has increased. Okay, that is not a good situation. Right. So what can we do about this? We want to keep those new jobs we've created, but we don't want the inflation. Right. Supply curve measures are put into place. So that would be deregulation, reducing the cost of electricity, tax breaks for businesses, giving businesses more money. And the supply curve shifts to the left. Can you see that? So Phillips curve is moving to the left. That is a result of supply side measures. That is because supply has increased. So our natural rate of unemployment falls to D. So unemployment has dropped still further, but I'm now at a situation where I have 9% unemployment and 0 inflation as a result of my supply side measures. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So in other words, by using supply side measures, if we have look at the last sentence here, demand can be stimulated to higher levels. In other words, there's less unemployment before we get inflation. So we've moved from 14% unemployment and 0 inflation to 9% unemployment and 0 inflation as a result of increasing supply. So that's what the Phillips curve shows me, that I need to increase supply using my supply side measures to maintain my drop in unemployment so that people keep jobs, but I don't want the inflation. Alright, so let's go back to this question. The question was, discuss the policy implications of the existence of the Phillips curve. So you now know what the Phillips curve is, you know what it looks like, you know the two variables that it compares and that it shows. So what does this mean for government policy? Oh, sorry. Right, here we go. When government wants to increase employment using expansionary policy like increasing government spending or decreasing taxes and the repo rate, employment may increase, but as people earn money, inflation increases. As spending rises, but supply cannot keep up. So that's the first part of your answer. That's the first part of what I showed you on the Phillips curve. that we use our expansionary monetary and fiscal policy to stimulate demand. Fantastic. We're very happy that we've stimulated demand. Because we see there's a drop in unemployment, but we see we have inflation, and we are not happy about that. So that's your first part of the answer, grade 12, is to talk about demand side policies. Right, then, second part of your answer. When the government wants to decrease inflation, they use contractionary policies. So they will decrease government spending, increase taxes, or increase the repo rate. Inflation may decrease as consumers demand less, households have less to spend, but this may lead to unemployment. And the third sentence that we can have there, the last part, should be that supply-side measures can therefore be used to solve this problem. Please add that in grade 12. I'm going to write it on the visualizer. I don't know why it's not there, but that should be the third part of your answer. Quickly going to write it on the visualizer and then I'll put it up for you. You must have a third part here in this answer. Alright, so what I've got on the PowerPoint grade 12s is the expansionary and contractionary monetary and fiscal policy, but the Phillips curve really, guys, is all about using supply-side measures and the new economic paradigm. So I've just written something which I want you to take down. Let's just line it up nicely. Okay, so supply-side measures can be introduced to ensure economic growth is maintained without inflationary effects. If I can turn that around. Yeah, okay. I hope you can read that. So please just add that into your answer, guys. If I can make it up. There we go. Okay, there we are. Right, so please add that in. Supply-side measures can be introduced to ensure economic growth is maintained without inflationary effects, because that really is the core of the Phillips curve. So please make sure you put that in on that 525 answer. Alright, everybody, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint now. And we're going to go on to question number 6, which is all about state structure, which is very topical, and all about the failure of the public sector. So let's go on to question 6. We have 3 more macroeconomic questions to do. There are 8 of them in total. So let's go on to the next one. Hope you guys all have that down. And I hope you all have that down. So what this was talking about here was expansionary demand side policies and then contractionary demand side policies. guys, I hope you're all rocking and rolling with this. I hope you're all with me. I hope gray cells are fizzing and you're creating neural pathways and everything is just making sense and falling into place. Past papers and past paper questions are such a good revision tool. They really, really are. Alright, let's go on to the next question, everybody, which is question number 6. Okay, we've done that. Right, here we go. So it says, study the information and answer the questions that follow. State capture the corruption investigation that has shaken South Africa. So let's read it together, everybody. South Africans watched transfixed, which means you can't take your eyes off the screen, as video from a hidden mobile phone camera was broadcast on TV. It showed a group of men in corporate uniforms walking into a vault, where one of them counts out bundles of banknotes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Bloody monopoly money, he laughs through heavy breaths. Must be 1 million. Right. So this is obviously about some kind of corruption or theft that is taking place. And you can see from the heading of the article, state capture and corruption, that we are going to be talking about public sector failure. Alright. So guys, let's do the questions. What is the reason for public sector failure above? So you need to think, who gave these guys the keys to the bank vault? I mean, you don't just walk into a bank vault or a vault in a company. So someone must have given them the keys. So therefore, the answer is corruption. Whoops. Let's move that out the way. There we go. Right. What is one effect of public sector failure? So when the public sector fails to deliver the goods and services that it's meant to, when there's corruption, when money goes into people's back pockets and is not used to build houses, schools and clinics, what are the effects of that, grade 12? That is what the question is asking you. So you could have said any one of these. Economic instability, inefficient allocation of resources, social instability, and unequal distribution of income and wealth. So these are the effects of public sector failure. The point 3 question, briefly describe the term public sector failure. So this is our definition question. Public sector failure occurs when government intervention leads to an inefficient allocation of resources and leads to a decline in economic welfare. So in other words, grade 12s, the money that has been stolen that they're talking about in this article, perhaps that money was meant to be used for housing in a poor rural community. That money now no longer goes there. So what is the effect of that? It's a decline in the economic welfare or the standard of living or the quality of life of the people of the country. And resources are not allocated efficiently. In other words, instead of allocating that money for housing, which is where it was meant to go, it's now going to just be used to satisfy an individual's own personal needs. And that is not an efficient use of state resources. And of course, that increases the wealth gap in our country and the income gap. Remember, we are one of the, if not the most unequal country in the world, if you look at measures such as the Gini coefficient. And all the state capture and corruption that is happening has just made that gap between the rich and the poor wider. Alright, let's go to the next question, everybody. Why is it important for information to be accurate in the public sector? So before I put the answer up, I want you to think about that for a moment. Why do you think it's important that government has correct and accurate information? What would happen if they had wrong information about the number of people needing water, the number of children who need to go to school next year? Why do they need to have accurate information? See if you can jot down a few points before we go through an answer together. Excuse me. Alright, let's put down ideas, grade 12s. If government has information that is accurate, it can function more effectively and supply more of the needs of the public. So that's the first thing. It can function more effectively and supply more of the needs of the public. So if I know how many children are going to be going to grade 1 next year, I can make sure that there are enough schools with places for them. Another thing you could put in your answer, grade 12s, accuracy can lead to greater tax collection. So if I know exactly how many people are employed, if I know how much they're earning, which tax bracket they fall into, I can increase my tax revenue collection as the state. And remember, what does the government do with this money? The government meets the needs of citizens. So this leads to a greater ability of the state to meet the needs of citizens and thus an improved standard of living. I'm sure you guys had quite a few other answers. It's such a pity you can't type in the type box. But there are quite a few different answers that you could have put there. So if you have something else, as long as it relates to the benefits of accurate information for government functioning, you will be given credit. Remember, we want nice full sentences for these answers. Alright, let's carry on to the last question for question 6, everybody, our 4-mark question. And that was, how does corruption affect service delivery? So again, grade 12s, there are probably quite a few different answers that you could put here, but let's see some of the possible answers that you could have. Corruption leads to money that's meant for income grants and social security payments being used elsewhere. So that's your first point. This reduces the number of people who receive grants. So if that money for social security grants goes to someone's back pocket and it's not used to pay out grants, people don't get their money every month. Corruption on the waiting list for RDP houses means that those who are meant to receive housing do not. So if suddenly someone who's never been on the waiting list for an RDP house is number 2 on the list, you know that there's a problem, because if they get that house, it means someone who's been on the list for many years will not be able to get a house. Money meant to be used to improve infrastructure and service delivery is used elsewhere. Service delivery worsens. The needs of citizens are not being met. Almost every day in our country, grade 12s, we hear about service delivery protests. And that is exactly what the question is talking about. Money is taken away from citizens who need basic services like water, electricity, housing, good roads, good social infrastructure like clinics and schools. That money doesn't go to where it's meant to go. So we have ineffective and inefficient service delivery, and therefore you have service delivery protests. And the last 2 points, grade 12s, the poor suffer the most. High levels of corruption have increased income inequality in South Africa, as I've mentioned before. So I will just give you a few minutes to take that answer down, and then we can go on to question number 7. Alright guys, I trust that you've all got that down and that you've made some notes for that question. So let us go on to question number 7. And we've already spoken about this today, and this is terms of trade. So sorry, something else I just popped in here. Remember the difference between the problems of public sector provision of goods and services, which is accountability, efficiency, assessing needs, pricing policy, parastatals, and privatization, nationalization, and public sector failure. Guys, those are two separate topics. So when you get a question about the public sector, please make sure that you read it very, very carefully so that you understand exactly what is being asked and what they want you to talk about. There seems to be quite a big focus on public sector failure if you have a look at the 2021 examination guidelines. And that's really what this question has been all about. This is also one of your possible model essays. But just read the question carefully. Make sure you know the difference between those two topics, please, because they are two different topics, although they are related. Alright, let's go on to question 7, everybody. Right, so this is terms of trade. We've spoken about it already today. It came up in section A of your paper, so here's another question on it. I did put up a slide where I gave you the formula, which is the ratio of index of export prices divided by the index of import prices. So let's see how we do with this question. Right, question number 1, everybody. Identify the index of export prices of 2017. Okay, that should be an easy one, Mark. You should all get it. I hope I can all hear you shouting 191. Yes, right, let's go. So that is 191, that's easy. Guys, what is the trend in the index of import prices? So let's just go back. So if I have a look at my import prices over here, going from 2016 to 2019, what is the trend? The trend means what is the pattern or the general direction? What would you say? Import prices are increasing or are they decreasing? Okay, that's what they're looking for when they ask you for the trend. So I think it's quite easy to see that the index of import prices is increasing. We started off at 141 in 2016 and we went up to 179 in 2019. Then our definition question for this question 12, briefly describe the term terms of trade. So if you go back to your multiple choice, match the columns? I think it was match the columns, it was there. So there is a definition for you. But if you go back to your match the columns, that's right. Terms of trade was there. The answer was C. The ratio between the price of exports of a country and the price of imports of a country. So in this answer, there are a number of different ways that you can write this. But let's go through it. So it's the ratio of the index of export prices to the index of import prices. It expresses a country's export prices in terms of its import prices. Or you could say the relationship between export and import prices, which expresses a country's export prices in terms of its import prices, and it indicates the relationship between exports and import prices. So in your answer, grade 12s, as long as you tell me that you understand terms of trade refers to the relationship between import and export prices of a country, and it expresses a country's export prices in terms of its import prices. That's what I'm looking for. And as I say, you can refer back to your multiple choice questions. Your match the commas question, sorry, it was asked over there. Right, let's do the next one. So, point 4, I hope you all finished it. I'll go back maybe. Maybe some of you are still taking it down. Just let me give you another moment for that. Alright, everybody, let's do the next one. Why will an increase in terms of trade have a positive effect on the welfare of a country? So if you remember from earlier, I said that an increase in the terms of trade is caused by one of two things. Either the export prices of a country's exports have increased, or the prices of the goods it has imported have decreased. So if either one of those things happen, the welfare of the country, so the standard of living of people in the country is going to improve. If your export prices increase or your import prices decrease, both of those are going to be positive. And now we just need to put that into a sentence. So, there will be increasing economic welfare because more revenue is earned from exports, because we've got higher export prices. And there will be increasing economic welfare because less money is spent on imports, because import prices have gone down. So you are spending less money on imports but receiving more money for your exports. So the situation of the people in your country, the welfare of your citizens will definitely improve. Right, I'm going to give you some time to take that down, and then I want you to try the next question on your own before I put up the answer. It's quite simple if you know your formula. The question is calculate the terms of trade for 2018. In other words, letter A, they've left it off. Can you see what the question says, grade 12? So this is very important. It says show all calculations, because there are marks for the formula, there are marks for your working out. Do not just put the answer. And then it says round off your answer to 1 decimal place. So, make sure you've got an answer for 7.2.4 and do the calculation for 7.2.5, and we'll look at it in a minute. Alright, have you guys all managed to do the calculation? Let's have a look and let's see what your answer is. So remember, my formula for terms of trade is index of export prices divided by index of import prices. That's given to you in the table. So you simply say 200 divided by 163 times 100, and that gives you 122.7. So 2 marks for being able to apply the formula, 1 mark for knowing I must times by 100, and then 1 mark for my answer. Alright, so I hope you guys all got that. Can you see, grade 12, that in 3 of the questions we had so far this morning for macroeconomics, the 0.5 questions, 3 of them, have been calculations. So calculations are really important. Those 4 marks at the end of your 10-mark question. Alrighty. Guys, I know we've now been here for an hour, and I want to push on and finish macroeconomics. There's one more question, and then I'll give you a short break, and then we can start one micro question before you go off and have lunch. Yum! Okay. Right, so guys, let's persevere. Let's push on. Remember what you're working towards. Alright? Remember what I said at the beginning of our session this morning. This is not just for your economics exam or for matric certificate. It is the passport to you achieving your dreams and goals. Okay? So when you've been sitting for a while and you're starting to feel tired, get those things into the front of your mind. Remember what you're doing this for. Okay? Alright guys, let's go. Last macroeconomic section B question. Question 8. Right. So here we have a picture. So we haven't had any cartoons actually in our macroeconomic section today. It's all been quite technical. But this is a photograph, not a cartoon. But remember, you can get visual sources, everybody. So this says robotic welding at an automobile plant. In the final assembly line, one can see clearly how machinery and human effort in assembly are divided into many specialized skills. The special tooling and machinery developed to handle assembly parts and to aid operators in their tasks can also be observed. So this is obviously in a large car factory. And instead of people, they've got robots or machines doing some of the specialized tasks. Right, so that's what you're looking at. That's your picture. That's your text. Let's go through the questions. So the first one is name the effect of international trade. So grade 12, so remember you've got your causes of international trade, which are divided into supply reasons and demand reasons for international trade. And then you've got your effects of international trade. In other words, effects means results. So what would you guys say? I think there's actually more than one answer to this question. So I've put down a few options. The answer that was given was globalization. But I think if you look at the text and you look at this diagram, you could also say that mass production and specialization could be effects of international trade that are demonstrated by this diagram. Right, the next question. List one supply reason for international trade illustrated above. So grade 12, your supply reasons for international trade are all to do with production of goods and services. So these would be some of the answers you could have had. Capital, technology, specialization, labor resources, and climatic conditions. Those are all supply reasons for international trade that we can link to this diagram. You can see the capital that's there with the machinery. You can clearly see the robots, which is the technology. You can see that this is a very specialized production process, that they are obviously specializing in the production of cars. You can see that they are using labor in a certain way, not for these tasks, but labor would be used somewhere else, and that is one of the supply reasons for international trade. And climatic conditions, which is also one of your supply reasons for international trade. So they only ask you to give one, and the word, your verb, is list. So you just need to name or give one of those. Right, the next question is our definition question, which you should all be getting 2 out of 2 for on every single question, because I know you're going to know your definitions super well. So international trade, everybody, what is that? That is the exchange of goods and services. So that's going to be your first key phrase, the exchange of goods and services. And we must put in there international borders, because otherwise it could be regional or domestic trade. So that's my definition. And then I wish I could hear some of your answers for 8.2.4. Why are robots used in industry? So these are some of the things you could have said, grade 12s. They can expand production by increasing productivity and efficiency. For example, there's no absenteeism, no labor staying away or being sick. Protect workers from repetitive or dangerous tasks. So for example, the work that's being done in the diagram or the photograph that you've got could be quite dangerous. So instead of getting people to do that, we get robots to do that. And that protects your workers. And you might not think this could be an answer, but it could lead to new jobs being created. For example, we need people to maintain or repair the robots. So those are 3 different options you could have had for question 8.2.4. So I'm going to give you a minute just to get all of that down, and then we'll do the last question, and then we'll have a 2-minute stretch break, and then we will do a microeconomics question before lunch.